Happy Thursday, guys. It is Matt from Train Sim Society, and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. I just got through watching this 4-hour preview stream for the Morristown line in TSW6. Well, I actually didn't just finish it. I watched it yesterday. I took a ton of notes. I think I had like 35 pages or something of all my thoughts, every single comment that I had, every thought that ran through my mind. Now, I might have missed details and things confirmed, but I tried to grab almost everything. So this was easily probably one of their longest official preview streams yet, and definitely one of the most detailed too. And I think that's thanks to the commentary and the special yet amazing guests that they had on this stream. Brandon, Cactus Juice, huge shout out to him. Also Eddie, both of them played massive parts on this project. And to be honest, I don't think this route would be the same without them. So we're gonna be talking scenarios, timetable, layers, scenery, sounds, and the Q&A section that happened at the end. I have all of my thoughts and even a couple of clarifications that I want to make along the way. So grab your favorite snack, grab your favorite drink, sit back and relax. I am ready to get this thing started. So we are starting first with scenarios. Now, we already knew there would be 8 of them, but now we have names. Teaching train, tucked in, safety helmet, back in the quiver, waiting online, Rosa rescue, twin peaks, and no power, no problem. Now, most of these scenarios are not short by any means. 5 of them run exactly an hour, 2 of them are in the 40 to 45 minute range, and the shortest is tucked in at half an hour. So I think that is honestly a really good spread, so plenty to do if you want some longer runs. Now, alongside that, there are 2 training modules. We have a 20-minute Morristown ATC and access tutorial. That was something I was personally hoping to see yet once again, more for folks that maybe don't know the systems and want to familiarize or potentially re-familiarize themselves with them. And then of course we have the standard 5-minute route introduction that we usually see on all routes. Now, for the timetable, according to the menu, there are 492 playable services, so almost 500. And to think with AI traffic, that number is likely way higher. So the line is going to feel busy. That is, of course, if you have all of the layers. And I'm pretty positive that the stream showcased that. Just watching Matt scroll through these services and layers on stream, that little scroll bar was so tiny. I have never been so happy to see that. Now, as for the actual breakdown, the Aero 3 will have 93 playable services. The ALP45DP that comes with the Deluxe has 169. The multi-level commuter cab car has 168, and the ALP46 sits at 98 playable services. So on top of that, you've got Acela depot moves, ACS64 depot moves as well. Of course, for the ACS64, you will need New York to Trenton for those layers. And the Acela, you'll need the Acela DLC, which you can get for a discounted price at the moment. That is, if you're playing on Steam. Included in that Amtrak stock, we have the Am Fleet cab car runs, which are also New York to Trenton. Those are also depot moves to and from Sunnyside Yard. And if you have Long Island Railroad commuter, you will see AI in and out of New York Penn. So it is going to be very busy there. And yes, the Aero 3 does actually have some runs out to Dover and not just Summit, though it is confirmed that those are limited. So what I like most here is the sheer variety. So you've got short stubs that play right up until a branch line splits off the map. You've got stopping patterns that skip certain stations, and you'll even see express trains blow past you if you're stopped. It's even possible that you could be the one overtaking. So it's very dynamic, and that is what makes this timetable stand out to me. There's so much going on, lots of things happening around you, and not every train is doing the same thing. And I think combining that with the random events and delays could definitely change the flow of how things are moving on the route. So the big first showcase was the Aero 3. Now, visually, they absolutely nailed it. Love that shiny reflective metal on the outside. That looks fantastic. The cab looks heavy and well used without feeling cheap. cheap. I'm not saying that to sound shady, but personally in TSC, I feel like the Aero 3 is just kind of cheap looking. It definitely doesn't feel like that here, at least from the preview, but the sounds like blew me away. And you know, reading comments online, not everyone is impressed with the sounds on this thing for some reason. That kind of shocks me because I believe the recordings for this unit actually came from beta testers that sourced real audio, and to me it sounds pretty good. Lots of detail there with those sounds, the click of the knobs, the hissing of the brakes, the creaks and clunk of rolling over track joints. That horn just has that punch and reverb that fills the world, and I was really listening for that because that is one thing that bothers me so much sometimes about horns in TSW is sometimes the sounds sound great, but there's no like atmosphere to them, there's no ambience to them, and I feel like the mixing on this was done very, very well. So a big round of applause to the audio team. Now, to me, it feels authentic, and as far as external sounds, I have audio clips of these units on my phone, and I went back and listened to them side by side compared to what we were hearing in the game, and they sound pretty spot on to me, so I'm kind of confused on where some of the criticism's coming from here in terms of the audio. I personally think they nailed it, so I've got nothing but praise for whoever worked on it. Now, in terms of scenery, I was very, very impressed by this too. So there are patches here and there where the ballast changes color depending on where you are. The gantries and overhead line equipment are solid. The stations are definitely well modeled with tons of care, lots of details, fencing in areas where it's realistic. I like the look of the vegetation too. There's this kind of like dingy warmth with browner grass, less saturation that really feels realistic for this area. Seeing the New York City skyline from Newark Broad Street with the haze on the horizon looked so good. A much needed improvement from New York to Trenton where you couldn't see that at all. And later Hoboken really stood out to me as well just for how much detail went into that station. And not just the station too, but the scenery around it. There are multiple skylines to look at. The water looks great. There's lots of signage. I was just beyond elated, and I think elated is an understatement. So gameplay wise, this was also our first real look at temporary speed restrictions, or TSRs. That's how they referred to it in the stream. So if you ever hear that term, that's what they mean. So they show up as yellow numbers in a white box on the track monitor, and straight out of Hoboken, we hit one at 25, not even a mile in. This is the unpredictability that makes them exciting. You never know where they're going to be, what the limit is going to be. A small suggestion for that though, and obviously I know this is not going to be implemented at launch, but maybe it could be in an update in the future or potentially in a future iteration of TSW, but I would like to see a setting for these TSRs that allows them to be dynamic. Right now, you can set a setting in the settings menu for, I guess, how often you want them to occur. I think there's a low, medium, or high chance. I think a dynamic option could work really well, maybe with weather settings. For example, if you load into a service and it's snowy, or it's rainy, or there's a lot of fog, maybe there's a probability you get more speed restrictions or a lower speed within them, or those restricted areas lasting longer in length that could delay more trains. I think that could definitely take the unpredictability of TSRs to a whole new level. I also like that there are trackside markers showing where TSRs start and end. Another very nice touch. There were some other details that jumped out too. I was quick to write these down. If you overshoot a platform, only the cars on the platform open their doors. And with a lot of routes and a lot of rolling stock we currently have in TSW, that's not always the case. Most of the time, all the doors will open, even if the train isn't on the platform. But I want to go back to Hoboken Terminal because this is easily one of the highlights for me. The team clearly spent a ton of time here. There are so many tracks, so many details, just seeing all the gantries and all the overhead line equipment. My God, this must have been an absolute nightmare to work on. I can't even lie. I thought station announcements were clear, calling out specific trains and arrival times, which added a ton of immersion. Now, the announcements for the platform platforms at Hoboken had proper reverb, echoing like they would in reality. The signage was spot on. The maps that you place are the actual real ones that you can find online, not those fake dovetail ones that we've seen previously. And there were actually a good number of passengers out and about walking around. I was a little bit worried we would see issues with passengers not being on platforms, but that wasn't really the case in this stream. So Hoboken is a low platform station, which is worth noting here. So on all of the New Jersey Transit stock, you will see passengers using the stairs on the trains. All of that was demonstrated and everything seemed to work as it should. And while at Hoboken, looking across the water, you could see the New York City skyline. It looked incredible. The only thing I wish was different was the terminal announcement wording on board the train when approaching the station. I feel like maybe it should say we're approaching our final stop and maybe remind you to take your belongings instead of just the standard line that is used for the other stations. That's really the only thing that jumped out at me that I felt was kind of jarring. So now on to the ALP45DP. Now right out of Hoboken, like I mentioned, there was another TSR, which was a great demonstration of how random they feel. In the cab, the loco looked fantastic. The changeover sequence at Newark Broad Street definitely exceeded my expectations. You hold down the fault reset, you hear the confirmation message spoken in cab, you hear all the beeps and sounds. Then after 2 minutes go by, you actually hear the engines wind down. It's very authentic. Clearly a lot of work and detail went into this, and as you'll notice, that is a reoccurring theme within this stream. They really do highlight a lot of the smaller details, and I definitely want to call that out when I notice it. So on diesel, you get 90% power with the ALP45DP, and on AC, you get the full 100. So it's a lot harder to get that thing moving. It takes a little bit longer, but once you're on electric, it accelerates pretty quickly. We also learned that the center track is bi-directionally signaled, so traffic can flow east or west, I guess maybe depending on the time of day, how much traffic there is, which is going to add a lot of flexibility. And like I mentioned earlier, with random events and delays, could impact trains and maybe make some later, potentially have some slot ahead or behind others. Now I even noticed as we head west into more suburban areas, the amount of passengers on the platform definitely decreases. That's realistic to real life. And speaking of platforms and stations, I do want to quickly clarify something here as well. Now in a previous video, I said something about Dover and Chatham stations being included as a nod to the dev team's base in Chatham, UK. Definitely poor wording on my part. I'm sure those stations existed in real life well before Dovetail was even a thing. What I meant was that the developers referenced them in their article as a little nod, not that the stations were added in game as some kind of tribute. So I definitely wanted to clear the air on that. Sometimes my videos end up a little long and bloated, and I try to cut out as much as I can, and maybe I shouldn't have cut out the key context that kind of pieced that together. So now as the run continued west in the ALP45DP, the scenery shifted drastically. More lakes and bodies of water, a more rural atmosphere, and at night it gets noticeably darker, which is going to make night runs much more interesting. I cannot wait to see it in autumn with all the foliage, especially in the autumn during the day, or possibly even in the snow. There were a few screenshots, I think 1 or 2 in particular that I remember, that just looked amazing in the snow. Denville Station also looked great. I love stations on curves. There are so many of them on the Boston to Worcester line, and you could even clearly see the diverging Montclair-Boonton line ahead. Geez, I feel like this video is so messy. It's kind of just my thoughts all over the place. It was so hard to structure this. It's just in the moment, I had so much to say, and honestly, when it comes to US routes, what I'm probably gonna do from now on is react in a video live. But then I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I could upload a 4-hour video reaction of a stream. That's too much, but I just had so much to say, and you should have seen me in the moment. Like, my jaw was on the floor and I was like screaming, like so happy. I was like, yes, yes, truly a highlight for me. So continuing down the line, we had Dover. Now, someone asked if the crossing gates being up at stop signals was a bug, and Brandon explained that it's actually prototypical because locals complained and the mayor forced a procedure to keep the road from constantly being blocked. That is interesting, but honestly, it doesn't surprise me at all. Now on into Penn Station, and this is where most of my mixed opinions lie. So visually, almost nothing has changed, which I can't lie is disappointing, especially since the old issues like platforms clipping through trains are most likely still there. But now for the signaling, that is a different story. Brandon said everything from tunnels to Newark Penn was ripped out and rebuilt from scratch. The progression into Penn definitely feels more aggressive, but that's exactly how New Jersey Transit operates in reality. They push to keep trains moving and on time, and we definitely see the signals reflect that within the stream. He also mentioned that a lot of people had complained about New York to Trenton signaling, and this route shows what it could be. And I can't help but wonder if that is a possible hint at future updates there. Do not kick me into speculation mode because, oh boy, I could go on for days. Now, as far as signaling within New York Penn itself, I believe it's unchanged, but not unchanged from New York to Trenton, unchanged from the Long Island Railroad commuter route, which was improved from New York to Trenton. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me, but that is exactly how I interpreted it from how it was explained within the stream. So now on to the ALP46 services and the multi-level cab car runs. Very, very happy with the cab car suspension. This thing finally balances around realistically at speed. That makes a huge difference for me. The horn on the multi-levels is the same as before, but honestly, I never really had a problem with it. I thought it sounded good. There were some mods that did improve it, but it was never really like bad in my opinion. Now, the dynamic brakes within the cab car do not work, but that is prototypical, so not a bug. Now, nighttime lighting wasn't the best I've seen, but it was decent, but definitely nowhere near as bad as West Coast Mainline South looked during its preview. My main disappointment was the sounds inside the multi-level cab car. There's just not enough rattle or joint noise, which makes it feel very, very flat compared to the Aero 3. I was definitely hoping we would get more in terms of updates there. So now lastly, I want to talk about the Q&A portion of the stream, which wrapped things up. Now, some answers were helpful, but a lot of time was wasted on questions that were already covered in FAQs, which is really frustrating. Still, there were key points. The Aero 3 audio was confirmed to be accurate, sourced from a beta tester. The longest runs will be about an hour and a half. There's no freight, which explains why the big intermodal yard near Secaucus is empty. There's surprisingly no route hopping either, which definitely worries me a bit because that was previously marketed as a core feature. I hope they plan to add that in at some point. Now, on the positive side, Eddie himself did confirm rail driver support works on all stock, and he personally tested them. That makes me happy with my custom controller setup. I use third-party programs that rely on that rail driver data, so that pulled a big smile out of me. Now, Steam Deck performance, that was brought up. Matt mentioned that it runs solid on medium settings, 1280 by 800 resolution, I believe, and also capped at 30 FPS. And also a note from me, if you're at home, because I have a Steam Deck and I love playing on it, you can actually stream the game from your PC to your Steam Deck with Wi-Fi for much better performance with barely any latency. That is, of course, if you have a solid internet connection. And that way you can use your mods, you can use whatever lighting enhancements or graphic enhancements and not have to suffer performance. I do it all the time when I don't feel like sitting at my desk, sitting at my computer, and I want to lay out on my sofa in my living room or just relax on my patio. Now, one nice surprise came out of the Q&A session at the end. If you use the Morristown ALP46 or cab car on the New York to Trenton route, the in-train announcements do carry over, and that alone will have me revisiting that route more. Not like I wasn't already going back to it. It's one of my favorite routes. And also at several points in the stream, even during the Q&A section, the devs were kind of tripping over the AM and PM times when trying to figure out what service they were going to play next, which really just reinforces my point that the game needs an option to toggle between 24 and 12-hour clocks. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, and it was actually a piece that I had completely forgot to include in my future content wishlist video for TSW. I'm so shocked this hasn't been implemented. Not everyone goes by a 24-hour time clock, and I feel like maybe that could be something hard to implement, but I guess in theory in my head it doesn't seem like it's hard, and I really would appreciate if someone could comment comment on how possible that would be. So the stream ends with them spawning an Arrow 3 into Secaucus to show the correct signal progression into New York Penn. That sealed it for me. One of my biggest complaints with New York Trenton was that literally as soon as I enter those tunnels, the first thing I do is I turn ATC and access off because I don't want to deal with that slowdown. It always makes me so late. I lose a ton of points. That has been corrected. Now there were a few visual bugs and odd lighting happening in Penn as they pulled in, but overall the route just looks and feels great. I feel really bad for these devs because at the end of that 4-hour stream, they looked exhausted. They were truly cooked, and I don't blame them. That was just a lot of talking, a lot of playing. I don't know if Matt normally has sessions where he plays that long. I'm not gonna lie, I do. And by that point, my head starts to throb. So huge props to all of them for doing it for that long. And of course, answering all of our questions. It was long, but it was worth it. And it was easily one of their best streams ever. I'm gonna say it. Now, I really didn't touch on performance at all in this video. And the reason why is because the way you saw the stream, it was a stuttery mess, if we're going to be honest. That really doesn't pertain to the route itself. That kind of exists everywhere on all routes. So, definitely a core issue, but definitely worth noting. Not something obvious to be pointed out, but it's there. And it was very distracting at times. So overall, the Morristown line looks like one of the strongest US routes yet, dare I say the best yet. I'm not going to fully commit to that though until I get my hands on it, till I give it a try and give it some hours. But the timetable depth, the variety of services, attention to detail in the scenery and signage, huge shout out to Brandon for that. There's just so much placed around the world in terms of signage. There's a little arrow that shows right after you pass the portal bridge, showing that swift interlocking is aligned to head onto the Morristown line. Like little things like that are implemented that he added in. That's crazy to me. We have the TSRs, all the announcements on the train and on the platforms. It truly is everything that I wanted. Now, Penn Station's visuals definitely are a letdown. The multi-level cab car sounds could definitely use work, but I think that the positives far outweigh those issues. And honestly, for me, maybe I'm just saying this because I'm a PC player and I mod the shit out of my game. I'm not really worried about the sounds too much because I'm likely going to install mods for them anyways. But that's really all I have in terms of critiques, really. Super excited to play this route when it comes, but I want to hear from you guys. What did you think of the preview stream? Do you see this as one of the best US routes so far? Or do some of those shortcomings stand out more to you? And do you have shortcomings that maybe I don't see as shortcomings? Definitely share all of your thoughts, your concerns below if you have them. That's gonna be it from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it to the end, thank you very, very much. Take care, everyone, and happy rail simming.